After a confrontational trial, which even included Darrow calling 35 Bryan as a witness, Scopes was ultimately found guilty. Although Scopes' conviction was later overturned, the precedent set by the case endured. It wasn't until 1967 that Tennessee repealed its law forbidding the teaching of evolution. And even today, the reverberations of the trial are still visible. One school district in Georgia recently began placing stickers on its biology textbooks disavowing the validity of evolution. The Supreme Court eventually decided that the stickers were unconstitutional, but a cultural battle over the validity of evolution still rages in the United States. Paragraph 1. Paragraph 2. Paragraph 3. 2. Core concept. Reading 41. Paragraph 4. Paragraph 5. Paragraph 6. Last sentence. Did you find any direction markers? List them. Main idea. Passage D. One of the most commonplace instructional strategies in elementary and middle schools is that of oral reading. Virtually all teachers, at some point in the school day, engage in this activity, whether by reading aloud to the class or by having the students read to one another. Although some recent educational theorists have challenged the efficacy of oral reading, its popularity in schools and 5 classrooms is unchallenged. The history of oral reading in the classroom is inextricably linked with the history of the culture that engendered it. Prior to the development of computers, television, and radio, reading was the predominant form of family entertainment. However, printed books were often scarce, and literacy rates were often low. Thus, families would gather around and listen to a book being read to them. Early classrooms were modeled after this phenomenon, and oral reading was such a part of academic life that schools were sometimes called blab schools. In these schools, students often read their lessons aloud simultaneously, even when the students had different lessons. At other times, all students read the same text aloud. 15. With the increasing availability of books, schools began using textbooks to teach reading in the classroom. By the 19th century, the focus had moved to teaching students eloquent reading. Students were expected to recite stories, poems, and prayers for the class, and the teacher graded them on their articulation and pronunciation, as well as their abilities to recall what they had just read. This method persisted into the 20th century and became known as the story method of instruction. Oral reading was such a focal point of instruction that philosopher William James stated, "The teacher's success or failure in teaching reading is based upon the oral reading method." However, as the 20th century progressed, the effectiveness of oral reading was called into question. Educational scholars in both Europe and the United States wondered exactly what oral reading was teaching students. With oral reading focusing excessively on pronunciation and dynamics, educators doubted that students were even able to comprehend what they were saying. One scholar quoted a study that claimed that 11/12 of students did not understand what they were reciting when they read orally. Friedrich Froebel, a German education specialist, argued, 42. Cracking the TOEFL IBT 30 that oral reading inappropriately placed emphasis on expression, when the emphasis should be placed on process. Also at this time, science was gaining increasing prominence, and across all fields researchers were placing a premium on empirical studies. Many long-standing beliefs and views were challenged. 35. And educational theories were no exception. Behavioral scientists studied reading practices and determined that oral reading was no longer in fashion. In fact, they concluded that the only time students read orally was in school. Most individuals read silently, and this finding led many schools to change their methods to reflect this change. 40. The new preponderance of written texts also played a role in the history of oral reading. With the amount of printed material rapidly expanding, silent reading, which was more efficient, became the reading model of choice. For a number of years, oral reading was absent from many a classroom. But in time, new research and studies brought oral reading back to the forefront of education. Presley's and Afflerbach's influential book Verbal Protocols of Reading emphasizes the importance 45 of oral reading, tracing its history back to the methods of Aristotle and Plato. In many ways, however, the new research reiterates what most teachers already know. For them, the necessity and effectiveness of oral reading was never in doubt. Paragraph 1, Paragraph 2, Paragraph 3, Paragraph 4, Paragraph 5, Paragraph 6. Last sentence. Did you find any direction markers? List them. Main idea. 2. Core concept. Reading 43 answers to drill number 1. Passage of paragraph 1. Plants reproduce by seeding. For short sentences like this one, don't worry about paraphrasing. Keep things simple. Paragraph 2. Seed first has tiny leaves. When finding the main idea, don't worry about strange or difficult vocabulary words cotyledons. They are not important to the main idea. Paragraph 3. Plants have a root system that helps growth. When paraphrasing, you don't necessarily have to note the exact functions of the root system. Details are not important. All we need to know is that the root system is helpful to the plant. Paragraph 4. Water comes through the roots. Again, ignore the fancy term transpiration. Paragraph 5. After maturity, plants focus on reproduction. Last sentence. Process starts all over again. Pay attention to the last sentence. Look for the author's final word. Is there a definite conclusion? The author wraps up things nicely, but some passages may end with a question or a call for more information or research on the topic. Direction markers. We use boldface for same direction markers and underline opposite direction markers. For example, the seed of a plant growing in a temperate area will wait until the cold winter passes before growing. During this process, minerals are carried up to the leaves of the plant, while oxygen and water vapor escape through tiny pores, called stomata, on the surface of the leaves. The main purpose of the fruit is to protect the seed, but many fruits aid in the seed's dispersal as well. For example, a soft, fleshy fruit attracts animals, which eat the fruit and thus spread the seeds. You may have spotted some others, but the key thing about this passage is that the information is all going in the same direction. The purpose of this passage is to inform the reader, and all the details provide an explanation of a process. Main idea. A plant reproduces with a seed, which grows from a tiny leaf into a mature plant capable of making its own seeds. 44. Cracking the TOEFL IDT. Each of our topic sentences discusses reproduction and the steps. Notice we did not mention the root system. That's because the root system is mentioned as a part of the growth process. We don't need to explicitly discuss each detail when stating the main idea, especially if the author is not introducing any contrasting ideas. Passage B. Paragraph 1. Intel is an example of good brand marketing. By reading the first sentence, we may be able to predict what's coming in the passage. It looks as if we're going to read a description of this company's business practices. Paragraph 2. Intel became a major producer in 1978. In addition to direction markers, time markers are also helpful. We know that we're going to read some of the background story. Paragraph 3. To save its market share, Intel started a new program. This sentence supports the introduction paragraph. Paragraph 4. One key to Intel's success. When the author presents an example, don't worry too much about what the example is. We don't need to know exactly what the details are for the main idea. It's enough to know that this paragraph will describe it. Paragraph 5. 2 important developments from the program. Again, don't worry too much about what the developments are. The important thing is that the author is giving the results of the program. Paragraph 6. Success led to a problem. The author introduces a problem, but we should note that it is the last paragraph. Therefore, we may think the problem isn't the main focus of the passage. Last sentence. New product introduced with no problems. This last sentence indicates that everything ended well. The earlier problem was mentioned only to show how good the company's strategy was. Even the problem fits into the overall direction of the passage. Direction markers. Again, we use boldface for same direction markers and underline opposite direction markers. Although the explosion of the home computer market certainly accounted for some of this dramatic increase, the Brilliance OFITS branding strategy also played a significant role. Despite these misgivings, Intel went ahead with its strategy, which in a short time became a resounding success. In an even more effective strategy, Intel also required computer manufacturers to produce products using competitors' chips. But the success of Intel's branding program led to a new and eminently profitable relationship between computer manufacturers and advertisers. 2. Core concept. Reading 45. However, the company faced a difficult decision: release the new product under the current brand logo and risk consumer apathy, or give the product a new name and brand and risk undoing all the work put into the branding strategy. This passage contains quite a few opposite direction markers. Notice how each one serves to indicate how successful Intel's branding campaign was. Main idea. Intel's branding strategy was important to its success and also led to some important developments in the market. As we predicted from the first sentence, we were going to read about a successful business strategy. We also brought in the developments mentioned later in the passage. The problem mentioned in the final paragraph doesn't need special mention because it again illustrates how successful